How are you doing? What's up? How's
Hey,
Hartford?
Gilad. Hartford's good. We're a little bit down this year because we haven't gotten any
Yeah.
snow. Like, there's been a little bit of snow, but like no real snow, right? So anybody who likes to ski has just we've all been out of luck here in the Northeast, pretty much across the board. There's been no snow. It's been too warm or too much rain. Like, it hasn't been accumulating.
Listen, there are so many Europeans that on one side will go like, "Oh my God, the snow is so horrible this year." At the same time, there are so many Europeans go like, "Well, we are so lucky that it's not that cold or so snowy this year because, well, geopolitics and the war in Ukraine, and
Hmm.
not enough gas to warm the houses or run industry." So yeah,
Serious
no,
problem. Yeah.
serious problems. Yeah.
Yep.
And with this very optimistic note, so you've been running in InsurTech Hartford for 5, 6, 7 years. How long?
Six years now.
And
I
that
guess I guess it kind of depends on where you start counting from, but the first event that we ever had was actually in April of 2017. But I had started the conversations and created the first meetup group online and in late 2016. So, and like I said, it depends on where you start counting from, but it's definitely been over 6 years.
am I right to say that that's the bigger regional InsurTech community conference, right? Because we can
Um,
distinguish, of course, InsurTech Connect, InsurTech Insights, the big conferences. Of course, InsurTech Connect Vegas, that's the biggest, that's the mothership. But in terms of regional conferences, you started basically as a meetup.
Correct. Yeah, and actually, I want to say InsurTech Boston did it first. Like, they were the
Ah,
ones that had the very first ever community with InsurTech on it, right? And um, when I started doing InsurTech Hartford, I had absolutely no intention of being in the conference business, and I think that's one of the big differentiators, right? So you look
mm-hmm.
at ITC or InsurTech Insights or Innovators and all these other media companies that are trying to grow a conference portfolio. They come at it from a different angle, right? I came at it because at the time I was 15 years in the industry as an IT guy, insurance IT guy. I started doing some research. I started seeing all the investment going into startups, and I started having these flashbacks to like the late 90s and .com days, right? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, I think this is going to be a thing and I want to be a part of it, but there was no thing to be a part of. So I knew I had to have a meeting, and I wanted to start getting people together to just talk about what was going on in the industry. As an industry insider, that was where I started it from, out of my passion and curiosity and wanting to stay active and close to the industry. Right? I really did not set out to sorry, I did not set out to begin building conferences. That wasn't my goal.
It's so funny because I think that we started more or less in the same time in different directions, right? So I joined Farmers end of 2014 or early 15, which means I started in InsurTech LA in somewhere in 16. So it more or less was with the InsurTech book, and it started as a meetup because also I came from big tech and joined Farmers, part of their, well, they did a lot of switch and bait, but I was part of their IT structure, their organization, and it was like, oh my God, I can't believe that they do this stuff this way. We need to build a community here in LA and to bring talent. And in a year or two, when I had enough and I have an idea for the best next whatever startup, I will have co-conspirators to start the next venture with. And my and my for me it was more about, well, there is no commercial, we're going to bring the people together. We had an event once every 6 to 8 weeks, and needless to say, all kinds of people pushed it or tried to pull it in different directions, accelerator here or there, and I was more operation, so I'm going to start the next startup. And with COVID, it basically turned into this, of course, to a podcast and having conversation. And I think that this is going to be episode 94 or 95 to be determined. So, and it's very interesting because you took the path, right? With, I think you were with Excel, then AXA, then I'm not really sure. I'm sorry, I don't know your CV by heart. And you took it towards building your own conferences, and not even one. You're starting to build your small little empire of small events.
Yeah, I mean, again, I didn't start out that way. It wasn't the intent. And what I wanted to do was be a part of innovation and driving innovation forward in the industry. And I thought startups was a great vehicle for that. And there wasn't as much, definitely not near as much support and activity and stuff as there is today. So there was no playbook, there was no script. I remember I went to ITC, is like, this is great, and I reached out to Jay, and he graciously, sat down with me at lunch one day, and he's like, I don't even remember the actual conversation, but it was something along the lines of, so you're going to do this like small community event thing. And he's like, I've never really seen anybody like make success from that. And so I think in a way he kind of planted a little seed. He made a challenge out of it, right? He was like, I don't think this could be done. And I had been to ITC, and I'd seen what it could look like. And I'd also seen some of the great work that, like Robin Mertens and team out in London was doing with
Mm-hmm.
InsurTech London, right? And had been to an early InsurTech Boston event, and I was like, yeah, I think we can do this. And then accelerator programs started popping up and all that kind of stuff, and we ultimately have always been about community, the InsurTech community. And it started with the InsurTech community in Hartford because, well, there's a lot of insurance and there was no InsurTech anything. But then the pandemic hit. And so kind of like the pandemic gave you a path, it gave me a path. And when the pandemic happened, I was able to start going online. I was forced to start going online. I could have always gone online, but I was kind of forced to, like everybody. And I feel like what started happening at that point is things just started to go more global, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't about the carriers in my backyard trying to get them to come out and play. We were getting engagement from all over the place, and we were originally, again, wanting to drive innovation in the industry. 2020 was the year that we were planning to start the innovation challenge, and when we planned that, it was really, we were talking to the local universities about how do we get the students involved and trying to get some of the local carriers to support it. But due to the pandemic, we wound up having to go online with that too, and it became a global innovation challenge, right? And every year we get applications from at least a dozen different countries outside of the U.S., plus coast to coast, north to south. And so, if the pandemic never happened, I might still be trying to figure out how to get local university students to put in one application, right? And so it's the pandemic kind of just it created a different path for me.
Yeah. Well, the pandemic for me at that point, I was running Bound API for about 2 years. And when it hit in 2020, I remember I just came back 2020, January or February, I just came back from Sao Paulo for meetings with Brazil, and we had projects and doing this and that. And we had a couple of other projects with the
Weren't you in the Lloyd's lab too?
Lloyd's Lab. I was as an advisor, so I was a board of advisor for a different startup. But
Oh,
that was
okay, okay.
different story. But
Sorry.
yeah, I was there, but it wasn't my startup. It wasn't something that I founded and CEO. But basically, with COVID, the next month you go like, okay, what's going on? We want to launch. We need to move forward. silence. And then you have 6 months, 9 months that the companies that you're providing them with SaaS or SaaS solutions just disappeared. And sadly for my startup, it was basically was a coup de grace and basically killed it. But for InsurTech LA, or to be precise, what we have now, which is the InsurTech Talk podcast, it's created another path. But this one, it's its own path by itself. Those are two different tracks that sort of support each other. Let's talk about the ecosystem, about the different communities. So, we have the big player, ITC plus DIA, which are Clarion events. We have InsurTech Insights that they have London and New York. They manage sort of to have these two cities, while of course ITC has Vegas, and I would say they use Miami for Latam, and I think Singapore for Asia, and Barcelona is coming up as a combination, which I need to come on, guys. Munich Dia was for Oktoberfest, and now you're doing it in November? Come on! So those are the big ones. I don't know what happened to Dig In. They just disappeared. You mentioned earlier InsurTech Innovators. I'm not really familiar with them. I don't think that I ever took part in one of their conferences. I assume it's 500, 600 people. But you're going there. But let's talk about the different communities. And you started with Instech London, which been there a while, in my opinion. They are doing an amazing job because they are a community, and I love what Robin, what they are doing there. Having that weekly meeting, having the ability to meet together and have a conversation.
Well, yeah, I to me, they were one of the originals. And it was also part of the inspiration for me doing the InsurTech Hartford stuff, because, working at Excel and having colleagues over there in London and seeing like, oh, they're going to all these cool networking events, and I'm looking out my window, I see all these logos, but there's nothing nothing like that here. So that was a part of part of the kindling, at least, if not the spark to creating the fire.
And and it can be a similar model, right? Or people don't play along, because the beauty about London, the city, everyone is in this square mile. Finish work, and you walk a few steps, and there you have your weekly, or once every 2 weeks, conversation with your colleagues about what's going on in the industry. And Hartford is a perfect example because everyone is there, and it's as small as 1 squared mile.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a concentration. I think one of the bigger differences between a London and a Hartford is infrastructure, right? Like in London, most people take the train into work, and that means they get to take the train home from work, which means that, hey, if they're going to go out and have a pint after hours for happy hour or something like that, they could do that. In Hartford, it's kind of a different lifestyle. You drive into work, and then you got to drive home, and you got to get home before your kids' soccer practice, right? So it's just a different type of community, and so I mean, I love going to London, and I'm sometimes, I guess I could say I'm a little jealous of what they have there, right? I think it's really cool.
London and Hartford has concentration of a lot of insurance professionals. But there is a difference in infrastructure. There's the difference between after work commitments and where people live. And of course, part of it is, as you said, oh, there is snow. London is not snowy. It can be rainy, but only once in a while it may snow. And you showed me once your backyard, which was like, almost a foot deep in snow. And needless to say that you have a few yards of driveway that, how much is it? I don't know, 30 feet? No, yards, or even more.
Yards?
No, how
I
many?
guess it's a
100?
couple football fields, yeah.
Jeez.
But
For me,
yeah, and so that's no fun when it snows, I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
Um,
but it's a different lifestyle. So
Definitely.
Hartford, you growing up and you're doing more and more conferences, and we have a few folks in Austin. There is of course the New York team, Chicago. I think that the different, not Chicago. Is there a Chicago? I don't think so, which is
Yeah,
very
there
surprising.
is. No, there is.
Who is
I
in
guess you haven't been
Chicago?
paying enough at me
Oh,
and
come on, that was
Nile
I think.
Doshi. Yeah, so actually, after doing so many years in Hartford, um, I always wondered why in certain areas we didn't see more InsurTech activity, and definitely Chicago was one of them. I think there's a lot of great carriers, a lot of strong brokers as well out there, and there are startups and there are investors, and basically all the key ingredients are
Hmm.
there, and not just one or two. Like there's a really strong presence. So I think people have tried to get that community activated in the past, but the one thing about communities is, if you talk about ITC, you talk about insights and all these other ones, right? It's a commercial venture. They're there to make a profit, and obviously everyone's okay with that. But the in the communities, it's a little different, right? Communities don't make a profit, right? Like no one's getting, you know, no one's making a living off of running an insurtech community, right? So there
You're,
has to be
mhm.
something there
You are
that
trying to
that
cover your costs.
that's typically what it's about. Yeah. And so there has to be something more to it than a commercial driver, right? And then so like what I tell my story about, like I didn't set out to do any of this. I just wanted to engage. And so it has to come from passion. There have to be people in that local community willing to do the work to make it happen. And I guess I was talking about this in the context of Chicago, so I don't want to make it sound like there was nobody in Chicago that wants to do any work. But to sustain doing an event is easy. Sustaining regular events is hard. And so I even think about the future of Hartford. Obviously, I've been doing this for 6 years now. I can't imagine I'll be doing it 16 years from now. So, but it's too valuable, I think, to the community to just stop it, right? So how do you make these things sustainable, right? And so to me, that's a little bit of part of the idea of going to other communities like a Chicago, and also working with Lisa Wardlaw and trying to get Atlanta activated, and just trying to see if we can get to a point where there's maybe enough scale to these things that we can actually pay people a livable wage to help run and coordinate multiple communities, right? So
Hmm.
that's the direction I'd like to see it go in, because there really is value. I believe in these insurtech communities. Bringing people together is so important because people don't go to the office enough as it is anymore. So you need to fabricate these opportunities, and I think that's also why we're seeing this. Some of these conferences grow to the scales that they're growing, because people need the excuses and the reasons and the opportunities to come together. So local networking events, I think it's the same thing. And but back to what I was saying, it's not about the money. It's got to come from people in those geographies that have a passion for it.
So, are you taking the Hartford community concept and template and implementing that in Chicago and Atlanta? So, same
I think
concept,
so.
same spirit, the same logo
I
for
think so.
sure, and
Yeah.
same style. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
because.
Because there's been a lot of lessons learned over the years, and I
Hmm.
I, I know shortcuts, and I know things not to do. I don't know everything. I'm willing to listen, and the way I look at it is I'm just there to help. I bring a lot of experience in this um, in this place, and in this and that's what I want to do. I just want to help these guys grow, and hopefully, like I said, we can get to a point where there's enough scale that it becomes long term and sustainable across more communities. Because even established communities like LA, right?
Hmm.
There's only so much Gilad that you could put towards that, and there's quite frankly probably only so much Gilad they want to see, right?
Oh no, they. I think it was a tweet recently from Brett Fulmer, which he's supposed to have an event today now somewhere in Orange County, and that's a perfect example. Am I going to that? I wish I could, but when I punch in, how long it's going to take me into Google, it's like 2 hours, something that usually will take 50 minutes. And
Hmm.
this is the biggest challenge that we have in Southern California, right? So
Hmm.
I usually define as Southern California, we are starting from Santa Barbara all the way down to Tijuana, including Tijuana, because we have a lot of people who are dealing, if they are insurance companies, startups, investors, and we have more and more and more investors moving here to Los Angeles, mainly to Santa Monica, Silicon Beach. But the challenge when you want to bring people to an event, there is a cost. There is, okay, I need to commute now. Now, we talked about it for your symposium, and you said, Northeastern, we know to get into the car and sit in the car for 2-3 hours. And sadly, in Los Angeles, we know how to sit in the car and not move for 2 hours, and we hate it. And we don't like to do that. So it's all about accessibility. And will the in front of me will finally move because he's now, I don't know, checking out TikTok instead of actually realizing that it's green. Um, so yeah, there is a lot of space here, but you need to understand how to deal with the geography and where there are the different population where they are. In California, the biggest challenge that we don't have enough big carriers. We have Farmers Insurance, we have Pacific Life, Topa, we have a couple of them, but then you have very small and regional. All of the big companies have some sort of an office, but not the headquarters. And then, as you mentioned, we finished school. We finished work. It's 5. I need to take care of my kids. I need to pick them up to soccer or something like that. Then now to sit in traffic and then meet to talk about insurance or InsurTech and the future of it. So it's a little bit different, and it has challenges. And the more people, the merrier, right?
Definitely. I mean, there's a big difference when 15 people versus 150, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but you're bringing up an interesting point about how um, within each community there's a culture or a lifestyle, right? And some are more conducive to supporting strong networking than others, right? So um, it's a good point. I've definitely seen the struggles that you have out there in LA with the traffic, and I feel bad for you, bro.
It's not that bad. It's just frustrating. That's a big difference
Yeah,
because, and you're familiar with the history of the public transportation. They pulled it out, so they will use cars. At the end of the day, and we can use that as a segue to the new symposium that you're going to have. It's all about accessibility and who it serves. Sometimes I don't mind that it will take me another hour if I know that I can utilize that hour in a different way, right? I can fly an hour more, but I can use that time rather than stop, I don't know, do different connections, jump on a car, on a train, and then go back to something else because there is so much overhead and interruption that takes out the quality time that I can actually do something with it. And people know their pecking order and they know how to prioritize their quality of life or lifestyle, and it shows. So no, yeah, it impacts in their decisions. And from that, which is the weirdest segue, let's talk about the symposium because you started at the meetup. You had a great, I would say, breeding ground to bring people and to more people and more people. Then you had 100, 200 small, not so small meetups. And I think last year uh, we sort of kid that you graduated and you actually produced a conference. 500, 600 people. How many people were in
700.
it? So, you see, I set the bar low so you can smash it from with 700.
Thank you, man. But yeah, I mean, we actually had the first ever InsurTech Hartford Symposium in 2019, and I love telling people the story that we put the whole thing together in 6 weeks. We came back from ITC that year, and we had no sponsors and no tickets sold. And by election day, we had the InsurTech Hartford Symposium. So we were really excited that we had almost 300 people there, and it had this really great vibe to it. And um, it was about a day and a half, and we did some workshops, and it was small enough that you can kind of get people to work and collaborate
Mm-hmm.
together. And it was like a Goldilocks moment, I called it, because it wasn't too big, it wasn't too small, and just the right amount of space for just the right amount of people, and it was just really great. And but then the pandemic happened, right? And we wanted to do it again in 2020, and we obviously we couldn't. So we wound up having the we went back to in-person events in September of 21, and we wound up having the symposium in April, end of April in 2022, and we grew it up to the Connecticut Convention Center, and that was like it was like a graduation thing to now be talking about the Connect. Like for me, the Connecticut Convention Center was like a big deal because it's a big space, it's a big place. Um, it takes commitment to get in there, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's one thing renting space in the Marriott versus the commitments you need to make when you want to fill the Connecticut Convention Center. So that was like a big step up. And so actually, all along, this whole journey is trying to help startups and innovators grow and help them find their way in the industry. But all along, and I didn't set out to do this again, but at some point I started realizing, like, wait a minute, I'm a startup trying to help startups, right? So, InsurTech Hartford, the first ever event that I had, I'm pulling out my credit card to buy pizza and 2-liter bottle sodas from Domino's, right? And now, in 2023, we're going to have the InsurTech Hartford Symposium at the Mohegan Sun Earth Exhibit Center, which is where they run Miss America pageants, right? It's like a really high end place. It's a massive amount of space, and
Wait,
it's
wait,
all
wait,
been
wait, wait,
boots.
wait, 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 wait. That's where they
Mm-hmm.
run. I didn't know that. So that's where they
Yes,
run
go Google it. Yeah,
the Miss US
Miss
pageant,
Miss America.
Miss
Yeah,
America. Sorry, what's the difference?
right. I don't know that there is a Miss USA. I think it's Miss America is what they
Okay, Miss
call it.
America.
But
Sorry,
um,
my apology.
but yeah, it's a high end venue, right? And so one of the things last year, we had the Connecticut Convention Center, and it was a good event. But I really spent some time trying to dissect like how to go from good to great, and I think where I landed was the big difference is experience, right? So everyone has content that and I've told people this before, but this is just how I've thought about it, right? So everyone has content. Content might make the difference between good and bad, but if you got bad content, that's not going to be good for you, right? But everyone has content. Food and beverage and some drinks and some networking and an exhibit hall full of vendors, right? Like everybody has these things, right? But how do you elevate to greatness? And I realize it's the experience around the event. It's what happens outside of the exhibit hall. It's the relationships
Interesting.
that people get to build and the connections that they make, and that's what drives the experience. So I set out to figure out how do I create the best experience that I could. And living in Eastern Connecticut, Mohegan Sun is actually 20 minutes from my house. So I went down there, checked out the venue, had a conversation, and I said, "This is it. This is the place." It's actually, in terms of the experience, they have the second largest casino in the United States outside of Las Vegas, and it's of that kind of quality, right? It's not like some bingo hall that they put slot machines in that you might see as you're driving across the country, right? It was built from the ground up to be a big and beautiful place. Two large hotels, with 2 saunas and 2 pools and lots of dining and shopping, and Michael Jordan Steakhouse, Coach, like they've got real brands there, right? And they have concerts and sporting events in their arena. It's a full entertainment complex, but it's also a business complex because other business events happen there too. So we so just the experience side was where I was focused when picking this venue. But we've also been digging deep into some other challenges that I think happen in the industry at a lot of conferences. And for me, I come from the carrier side of the house, right? That's where I spent
Mm-hmm.
21 years of my career. And so that's how I tend to think about these things. And I personally, have gone to a lot of conferences, and there was just things about them that I love, and there are things about them I don't love, right? And one of the things that always kind of bothered me was this feeling that by going to this event, I'm going to wind up being hounded by salespeople for the next 6 months, right? So I don't, I mean, it's just, I think there's a lot of people that feel that way, right? So we've done a lot of things, and we're doing a lot of things explicitly, intentively, to try and create um, a hybrid of best of both worlds. Obviously, if you took all the insurance carrier people and you locked them in a back room and you never let them be out in the floor, then the all the partners and sponsors and exhibitors would get no value, right? So you can't do that. But what we've started doing is um, creating roundtables and content where they can get together as peers in smaller, tighter environments for maybe 45 minutes at a time, and really connect with each other deeper and have real meaningful conversations. But in the meanwhile, we're making use of this 110,000 square foot exhibit hall that we have to create an integrated experience around obviously, all the vendors, the latest startups, and the latest emerging techs, and all that is going to be there. But that's also where the two main stages are going to be. So there's always going to be buzz in the room. And we did this last year, but we learned some lessons on how to do it better this year. We've hired a sound engineering company to help us make improvements as well. And so definitely lessons learned as we're growing this thing. But the idea is to keep everybody in the space as much as possible, because that keeps the energy up. It creates the foot traffic, and so the networking lounge. We're gonna have this beautiful networking lounge built in the middle of it, and so there's really, except for when people go into these little breakout sessions, you don't need to leave. You're in this space together, experiencing it with everybody. And at the end of the day, when the conference is done, and we have our networking reception, you then get to go out and build even deeper relationships around the property. So I don't know, that's just the logic and thought that some of the logic and thought that's gone into trying to make um, the best event that we can. In we don't want to be the biggest, right? There are definitely some big conferences out there, and I love them. I go to them. I think they're great, but I'm trying to create the best experience that I can. So
So,
anyway, thanks for letting me
mhm.
ramble on about that.
No, of course, I didn't want to stop you because otherwise I will ramble. And, when I ramble later on, I'm trying to edit myself out from the conversation. And then it just looks and sounds weird. What what is the branding or the positioning in terms of a conference that you would like to have? And you can, if it's too much in terms of strategy or competition, you don't really have, you don't really need to answer that exactly, but please tell us.
No, first off, I think I spelled out a lot already.
I know.
You
Just
know,
trying to narrow it
um,
down to a small
yeah,
sound
the
bite.
the differentiation, right? To me, there's definitely large events out there, but to me the differentiation is the way we're intentionally considering each of the independent audiences, and there are really separate audiences that you bring together, and it's a little bit of an art to orchestrate them so that they're all getting the most value they can. Carriers want specific things to consider that their value. The solution providers have things they need to feel that they got their value. The startups and the investors also need have ways that they judge their value. So we are strategically putting things in place for every single one of these core audience groups.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'll go back to, we don't want to be the biggest, we want to be the best that we can be and the best that we know. We want people to enjoy the experience. We want them to get the most value out of it. And from a brand perspective, I'd be honored to be known as the premium event, right? We've picked a destination resort, beautiful place, lots to do, great time, and that's and the ability to actually conduct meaningful business and learn and grow in all the ways that you would want to at a conference. So that's what we're trying to do, right? And I, like I said, I'm going to continue going to all the big events. I love the big events myself,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes you feel the need to disconnect after some of these things, right? And so this is an opportunity to disconnect, right? Go a
Listen.
little slower,
Mm-hmm.
spend deeper time, build better relationships. And that's why you mentioned some of the other specialized events that I've been a part of, and it all draws from that same kind of a theme, right? People get more value and more meaning when they could spend more and better quality time together. And when you're at a 10,000 person event and you're shaking a new hand every 5 minutes, it's a different, it has its purpose and its value as well, but it's just a different
I would,
um,
yeah,
approach, right?
I would categorize the difference between building a relationship versus transactional. So there are, without naming names, there are different leaders in the conference industry that will be more transactional, which is all about, okay, bring me the next ticket, next attendee, and the sponsor, who don't really grasp the importance of relationship or don't set it up in the right priority, and versus people who, it's all about the relationship. If it's not now, it will be later. I'm talking about the monetization. If it's not coming now,
Mm-hmm.
we may monetize it later. If we will monetize this relationship, sometimes, actually most of the time, you don't. And I've seen it in terms of the attitude towards how you host. So who is inviting whom, and all the different elements that go with that, and how you set up the structure. And you talked about the hall and the energy and the music and the lights, which you need to be careful not to turn it into a discotheque, right? And it still needs to be professional. But the most important part, how do you create the opportunity to people to meet? You have the meetings, you have the offline meetings, you have the Brella meetings, you have the plan meetings, and then you have the serendipity meetings. And that's one of the things that I really love about Jay's vision and attitude. And there was a point, and I even written it on my blackboard here, which is like, you need to geek out about relationships. So even the structure of how you set up the line, the queue for the food during break time, or where the different coffee stands, it's all about, man, can we introduce another friction so people can, not friction, opportunity, so people can meet each other and have some sort of a conversation. Maybe yes, maybe no. If it will increase by 5% the opportunity that a meaningful relationship will come, and they will go back home saying, oh, it was successful because I met that person, it's worthwhile. Because it's also, when once you move away from transactional thinking, the beauty about it, you think about the long term. It's not just what's my gain for this year, which is important because there are a lot of salaries to pay. And I'm sure that you have a lot of expenses for this year and the previous years.
It's it takes an army to put an event like this together for sure. Running networking events, is one thing. Uh, Running a conference and trying to get 1,200 people to come on out and making it meaningful for every one of them. And, even
Mm-hmm.
things like the experience of your onboarding your exhibitors before the conference. Like we've sat here
Critical.
and done process mapping, and we've actually started to get feedback from sponsors saying, I've done a lot of events. This is one of the most organized events that I've seen, and I'm like, wow, that's exciting to hear, because we've actually invested a lot of time and energy into planning that out to be organized.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a process and IT guy. That's my trade, right? So it's hard for me to not, at least in some degree, try to be organized about this stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
and we definitely we are thinking about all the angles. We want to deliver a great experience, and I'm very excited for the program that's going together. You mentioned lights and stuff. Like we let's just say that we have more things that are not ready to be public yet, that we are planning, that are just going to blow people's minds away.
Great. Thank you for saying that, because I was trying to stop you so we can, because we've been running for so long. So let's talk about a couple of other highlights. Who are the
Sure.
speakers? What special features? Who should attend? Why? And what not surprises you have for us?
Not surprises. Well, I
Well, you
mean,
said that there are
the
surprises, and surprises you need to keep secret, unless you want to say the surprises now.
yeah, no. So things like, we've taken our agenda, right, which we're still making adjustments to from moment to moment as we
Mm-hmm.
see new opportunities. Like, um, for example, Chat GBT has become such a what's going on here kind of moment for anybody that has anything to do with tech in any industry. So we realize that, hey, we've probably got to bring some focus in on that, right? So and then trying to find the right speakers and the best experts on emerging subjects like that, right? But we've also taken a look at our content and said, how do we make sure that what we're actually delivering is of quality? So we've been working and building relationships with leading industry analyst firms. So people like Celent and IT Navarco, who, by the way, so believes in what we're doing, that they're building a program for their CIO council inside our event, right? So
Nice.
we're expecting 100 CIOs plus to be coming to the event just through that one strategic relationship. But by using analyst firms, media journalists and stuff that are experts on what's going on in our industry, uh, these are the people that are doing the research, and these are the ones that are going to be moderating and driving the discussions, right? So so again, just another example of how we're focusing on the content side, and that's for the carrier people in the audience, and even the startups that want to learn what's going on. We've been focusing heavily on trying to make sure we get the best quality content we can. Um, Obviously, I've mentioned things like the CIO Council. We have an
Mm-hmm.
executive boardroom event. That's actually we've even, if you go to our website, this isn't a secret. There's actually three levels of participation at our event. You can register as general admission attendee. You can register as a VIP, or you can register for the executive experience, which includes uh, special content, limited seating, um, dinner, lunches, all fine dining, plus the price also includes 2 nights in an executive suite in the hotel, which is obviously clearly an upgraded type of suite with river views and stuff. Like we are creating higher levels of experience for people. So I see some conferences going the other way. They're like, how do we go down? How do we make these tickets cheaper? How do we sell tickets even less expensive? And actually, what we're not even focusing on the price so much. It's more about how do we make sure we create more value and more exclusive opportunities for these different audiences. So um, so we've, I don't know if I've answered your question or if I've gone off on a tangent here, but um, we are looking to bring together um, industry leaders and influencers. Actually, Gilad, uh, uh, I understand that you're going to be receiving an award, right?
Apparently, that's the email that you sent me. If say that,
But
so
this is
let
a
me.
type of thing that a community focused event group would do, right? Like there's a lot of people like yourself that have been out there for years preaching the gospel and evangelizing InsurTech and helping in so many ways that, and they do it so selflessly, right? So we're taking the opportunity that since we have these eyeballs, to get these people on the stage and give them their moment and reward them for the selfless work they do. So thank you, Gilad.
Thank you, sir. It's my pleasure. Already booked my flight and hotel room. I Yes, and I try to figure out: do I fly to Boston, New York, and take a train, or take the Uber at the end of the day? As I said,
Mm-hmm.
fly small change. Hopefully, uh, my layover in Chicago will be long enough so I can jump on the next plane and then Uber all the way from Hartford to the casino. But yes,
Yeah, yeah,
so I
that's
hope to be there in
not a
time.
bad way to go. I'm
Yeah,
sure you will.
I will. I will. Listen, I had the pleasure of attending a few of your events,
Yeah, and
including
hopefully your Uber driver doesn't get into a car accident this time, right? Didn't we
exactly.
have that problem once?
Yes, we did, and I was supposed to talk, and I don't remember if it was my startup or a startup that I'm on their advice that I had to present, and who was it? And yeah, it was one of those events, but it was great. It was a wonderful event. So
But you
should
want to
we?
know what?
Mhm.
I'm just gonna highlight something. Sorry to interrupt you again,
Yeah,
but actually, what we just did there is we reflected on an experience that we had together around events, and that experience helped create our bond. So I just wanted
indeed.
to
Yeah.
point that out, right? Experience matters.
Do you remember
Relationships
the
matter.
time
They're
that you
built through
had?
these events.
Yeah, remember the time that you came to give a talk in my event and the Uber had an accident? Yay!
We'll be talking about this when we're 20 years older from now, let's just say, right?
You know,
Hopefully we're alive and well. But
I prefer
yes,
the story that Mark tells about me, but it's for a later conversation. Let's talk about slopes and all kinds of special experiences.
sure. Yeah, I mean, collaborating and partnering with others has always been something that I'm a strong and firm believer in. And so I was having a conversation with David Gritz one night, and he's like, you know, he's such an avid snowboarder, really. He's actually
Hmm.
top of the line, right? And we were talking about it, and and he's like, maybe it'd be cool if we got some investors and started founders together and did a ski event, right? Because this happens in other industries like VCs on
Yep.
skis and that sort of stuff. And I was like, hey, you know what? That sounds like a great idea. Let's do it. He's like, you want to do it? I'm like, yeah. It's not New York. It's not Hartford. It's just David and Stacey. We're partnering. We just want to help people have the best experience and build deep relationships. So we set out to make it exclusive and keep it exclusive, right? We don't want 100, 200, 500 people coming to this. We do 30 to 40 people. That's it. And oh my gosh, the energy and the relationships and the rapport that happens. And you know what's the most exciting thing is when investors come up to me and say, "We made deals at your event," and that's just it's exciting, it's rewarding, and the funniest part about the whole story though was when I said to David, I like the idea, let's figure it out, let's do it. And then I said to him, now the only thing I have to do is I have to learn how to ski because I had never skied in my life. So, but that's, I guess, can lead me down a whole nother story. But slopes, we did slopes last year for the first time in 22. Last summer, we did whitewater rafting in Santa Fe, which was great. We did slopes again recently in Beaver Creek, and that was great. And right now, we have the wait list started for the InsurTech Trails event.
Trails, what's
So
that?
that's going to be coming up in June. So same concept, same target audience, same feel in terms of exclusivity, founders and investors, trying to get as close to an equal balance of the two of them. And we're going to Aspen Snowmass. We're going to so these are not just boondoggles, by the way. There's always a business component where there's programming. We bring in expert speakers to talk about very relevant subjects. For example, this last Slopes event, Josh Curry from Serious Point was talking about founder compensation and how as an investor that works out. We had table topics where we broke into different groups, and you can hear the CVC angle on something versus the angel investors angle on it versus the startup founders angle on it, and they're in these small groups and they're just having these really deep conversations and stuff, and it's just so awesome. So anyway, back to Trails. We're going to do that in Aspen Snowmass. We'll spend the day doing the deep programming stuff, and then the next day is all where the bonding happens, right? So you imagine Slopes was about skiing. Well, Trails is about doing things like hiking, horseback riding, ATV riding, UTV experience. So we found a place that has we found a ranch that basically has lots of activities. So we'll spend the day bonding over various activities, and then the plan as it stands right now is that Wednesday night to go to the Snowmass Rodeo and eat barbecue and enjoy an actual rodeo, which, you know what, in my life I would have never probably gone to a rodeo, but that darn Yellowstone, man, it's kind of got me curious. I don't know if you've ever watched Yellowstone,
I
but
watched it. I think the first time I saw a rodeo was in 2006 in Fort Worth. It's yeah, that was an amazing experience, because
you see what I mean?
for me, no, I'll tell you what, because the beauty about this country is that it's so diverse that people don't understand how much it's diverse. And especially, coming from Israel and looking at the different elements that usually go like, oh yeah, it's like that small thing that you see on TV and that small thing. Because in movies, you see a little bit here, a little bit there, and then you see it in real life. And then once I moved here, started to patch all of those things together all these patches that we get the foreigner or the outsider view on things, and you're starting to create your own image of what is the US, right? It's very interesting, but that's not for this episode or for this topic about US history and where it's going. A different episode, different type of podcast.
Definitely.
Okay, I think that we rambled enough. So May 1st and 2nd,
Second and
right?
third.
2nd and 3rd. Okay, cool, great. What's the name of the what's the name of
InsurTech.
the hotel? No, InsurTech
Oh,
Hartford
Mohegan
Symposium, I know.
Sun.
Mohegan Sun.
Yes.
Great.
Yes. And hopefully I've done a well of enough job of explaining to people the differentiation of what we do with a lot of other conferences, and also help people understand that InsurTech Hartford is it's more about the city of Hartford and the carriers that we have there now. It's really a global brand, and really we're so happy and honored to be able to have the ability to bring people together from all the various audience all across the industry. So thank you, Gilad, for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to seeing you at Mohegan Sun on May 2nd and 3rd.
First of all, it will be my pleasure. Hopefully, my connection in Chicago will work properly, and the Uber driver from what's the name of the airport in
Bradley.
Hartford? Bradley
Yeah.
will get me there in time and in one piece. And we didn't even manage to talk about all the different InsurTechs out there, the different regions, which is okay because there are so many of them, and we can always do another episode just to talk about that. Cool.
Certainly.
Wonderful. Stacey, Thank you very, 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 very much for joining me today to talk about, the rise of the IT man to a conference man. We can use that as a title. And of course, talking about the conferences.
I don't know, with this podcast, I think we could transcribe it and turn it into a book. All right.
Yeah, that can be. I can see, using ChatGPT and after transcript, make it a little bit nicer, and please cut it to small snippets so I can tweet, and others that I can use for a TikTok, although I don't have TikTok, but that's a different story. My friend.
Not yet. Thank you, sir. Yeah,
thank you.
Fun as always, and I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to seeing you.